Sarah, and today we're starting the wrap-up of 2015. Today we're starting out with the statistics of my reading in 2015. Now, there are a lot of people that track way more stuff than I do, and actually in 2016 I will be using this ridiculous awesome spreadsheet that was created by Brock from Let's Read that tracks way more than I tracked in 2015, but I still tracked several different categories, including new reads versus rereads, fiction versus nonfiction, series versus standalones, and more. So we're just gonna chat a little bit about all of those today, and later this week I will be sharing with you my favorite and least favorite reads of the year. So for the overarching statistics, I read a grand total of 88 books this year for a combined total of 31,526 pages and an average star rating of 4.03. So on the whole, my reading year in 2015 was really fantastic. As far as my breakdown of months go, I read over twice as many books in the latter half of 2015 than I did in the beginning half of 2015. In the early half of 2015, my average books read per month was only 4, and in the latter half of 2015, my average books read was 10.6. So like I said, there are a few different categories that I tracked this year, specifically new reads, rereads, fiction, nonfiction, series, standalones, and the gender of the author that I was reading. When it came to my new reads versus rereads and my fiction versus nonfiction, I actually ended up with the exact same statistic. Out of 88 books, I read 64 fiction books and 24 nonfiction books, and I read 64 new ones and 24 rereads. So that means that my fiction and my new reads comprised a total of 73% of the books that I read this year, and my nonfiction and my new reads comprised a total of 27% of the books that I read this year. There's a bit more variety is looking at my series versus standalone, which wound up being almost an even split. I read 43 books that were in series this year, which comprised 49% of the books that I read, and I read 45 books that were standalones that comprised 51% of the books that I read. And where we have the most variety is in the gender of the authors that I read. Over the year, I read a few books that were written by male and female authors, 3 specifically, which comprised 3.5% of the books that I read, but the overwhelming majority of the books that I read were written by females, and that comprised 62.5% of the books that I read for a grand total of 55 books. That leaves 34% and 30 of the books that I read written by male authors. So that gives you the general idea of the statistics on the different books that I read this year. Like I said, I'm using this fantastic spreadsheet that was created by Brock from Let's Read to track all of my reading in 2016, so there will be a whole lot more statistics to look at the end of 2016. And now that we've looked at the general stats, we're going to talk a little bit about star ratings. So if you watch my videos for a little while, you know that I don't give just whole star ratings. For the most part, I give whole or half star ratings, and ever so often, when I can't really decide, I will give a book a 0.25 or a 0.75 star rating, but for the most part, I try to keep it at 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc. So obviously, based on the fact that my average star rating for my books this year was 4.02, I had a pretty solid reading year, and in fact, the highest number of star ratings I gave out was 4 stars, comprising 23 of the 88 books that I read in 2015. Thankfully, the smallest number of ratings that I gave was for 1 star, and that was only 1 book that I read in 2015. I gave 4 books a 2-star rating and 2 books a 2.5 star rating. 14 books got 3 stars, 6 books got 3.5 stars. Like I already said, 23 books got 4 stars, and 10 books got 4.5 stars. Now, in actuality, the star rating that I gave out the most this year was actually a 5-star rating, comprising a grand total of 28 of the 88 books that I read this year. And I had a moment when I was looking at these statistics where I was like, how the heck is the most common star rating I gave this year 5 stars? Have I really become that uncritical of a reader? But then I had a thought, and I realized I've been rereading a lot this year, particularly in the latter half of the year. So I did a further breakdown and realized that of the 28 books that I gave a 5-star rating, 15 of them were rereads of series that I absolutely love, like Harry Potter, Anne of Green Gables, and The Time Quintet. So I pretty much knew going into all of those books that they were going to be a 5-star read. So in the end of the new reads that I had this year, only 13 of them were 5 stars, and all of those stories were absolutely wonderful and fantastic. They include books like The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton, The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein, Peace Like a River by Leif Enger, among several others which I will be discussing in my favorite and least favorite wrap-up video for 2015 later this week. So there you have it, friends. That is the overview of my reading statistics for 2015. I had a lot of fun tracking even just these few categories during this reading year, and I am very excited to track way more stuff in 2016 because even though I am a words person and an English major, I do think statistics on this kind of thing are a lot of fun to look at. So I'm really excited to keep an in-depth record of all of the books that I read in 2016, including things like the country that they take place in, their genre, and a whole lot of other stuff that I just didn't think to track in 2015. So if you guys are a statistics nerd like me and tracked any of this throughout 2015, or if you just want to look this up now that you've heard what my statistics are, the 2 questions I have for you are: what was your breakdown of new reads versus rereads, and of fiction versus nonfiction? I'm very curious in particular about the fiction versus nonfiction because I have realized recently in watching a lot of booktubers that I read a lot more nonfiction than most booktubers that I follow. So I'm really curious to see how many of you guys also read a fair amount of nonfiction, or if you don't really read that much. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time with my favorites and least favorites of 2015. Bye! But I still tracked several different But I tracked several different But I still told me when I was looking at this. So if you guys are